work as an airport officer. A man just showed me a passport from a country that doesn't exist. When a strange man walked up to me and spoke in a language I had never heard before, I wasn't sure how to react. I called over my manager, but I just never could have guessed the horrifying reality this would lead to. We took the man to our questioning room to get him to give us some form of identification. After countless failed attempts at communicating with him, I pulled out my driver's license and pointed to it, hoping he would understand what I meant. That's when he handed over his passport. It seemed legit at first, but that all changed when I took a closer look. I noticed that his passport said he was from a country named Agartha. We didn't know what to make of it, but he stared at us, as serious as he could be. Eventually, we called in an officer of foreign affairs from the FBI, and that's when things got serious very quickly. The mysterious man provided unidentified currency, photos from an unidentified land, and the passport from the unidentified country. This FBI guy was baffled. He had no clue what to do, so he eventually gave this man a map, and after some more arm flailing, managed to ask him where he was from. This man looked at the map for a minute, and then adamantly pointed to the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. This FBI officer looked confused, and after some phone calls, he took the man's bag and then placed him in handcuffs and transported him to a nearby jail cell. We began to unpack the bag and found more objects from this unidentified land, such as postcards, a laptop with a brand no one had ever heard of, and some more photos. These photos are what has been keeping me up for the past 20 hours. Their contents were of some unidentified land taken from a large tower. The city was decimated, bodies everywhere. The photographer seemed to be the only living one in the area. These pictures continued for what must have been 20 photos, constantly following the location of the last picture, all leading to one obscure house in this city. Then we got to the last picture. It was a picture of a man, looking at the camera hopelessly, hands chained to the wall. He still had his business attire on, but was missing a button up under his blazer. His skin was exposed, and we could see unattended cuts festering at his skin. The man looked to be on his last breath. After seeing this, the officers apparently rushed to the jail cell for questioning, but when they got there, they were told the man had never arrived. Then, they ordered the police station to track down the squad car using GPS, but the car's locator no longer existed. It hadn't given off a signal in 13 minutes, and no one had heard from the two officers. One night, as I sat at my desk, scrolling through the same photographs yet again, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. In the background of one of the images, obscured by the ruins of the city, there was a faint, shadowy figure. It was almost imperceptible, like a whisper in the darkness, but it sent a chill down my spine. I zoomed in on the photograph, trying to make out more details, and that's when I saw it. The figure appeared to be tall and cloaked in darkness, with elongated limbs that seemed to stretch unnaturally. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly, malevolent light. My heart raced as I continued to examine the other photographs, and to my horror, I discovered that the shadowy figure appeared in each one, always lurking in the background, watching and waiting. Terrified, I brought my findings to my manager, who shared my sense of unease. We showed the photographs to the remaining officers and detectives who had worked on the case, and a sense of dread settled over the room. As we delved deeper into the mystery, we uncovered more disturbing information. The man's passport, which had seemed so legitimate at first glance, was now revealed to be filled with strange, indecipherable symbols that defied any attempts at translation. The unidentified currency, upon closer inspection, appeared to be made of a material unlike any known on Earth, emitting an eerie, faint glow when exposed to light. The laptop from the unknown brand revealed a cache of encrypted files that seemed to contain cryptic messages and diagrams that made no sense to us. The sense of foreboding grew stronger with each passing day, and it became clear that we were dealing with something far beyond our comprehension. And then, one fateful night, as I was alone in the police station, poring over the photographs once more, the lights flickered and a bone-chilling silence descended. I could feel an invisible presence in the room, and when I turned around, there it was, the shadowy figure from the photographs. My heart pounded in my chest as the figure slowly advanced towards me, its glowing eyes fixated on mine. I reached for my phone to call for help, but it slipped from my trembling hand, crashing to the floor. Just as the figure was about to reach me, the lights flickered back on and it vanished into thin air. My manager and the other officers rushed in, responding to the commotion, but they found no trace of the shadowy entity. I thought our family tradition was normal. Now I know the disgusting truth. Some families have weird traditions. Mine was no different. For as long as I can remember, every Friday night my father took me down to the beach to look at the waves. I always thought it was innocent. I just never understood the horrifying reality of what he was doing to me. We didn't follow any other routines with the rest of the family. We barely even ate meals in the same room. But regardless of the weather or conflicts or any other excuses, at exactly 7 o'clock, my father would always drive me, and only me, down to the beach to look at the waves. That habit became more sacred than religion, and almost more important than school. We never missed a Friday, not one single time. My earliest memories of these trips were positive. We had a puppy, a German Shepherd named Lola. That dog loved nothing more than to chase me up and down the dirty sand dunes, jumping into the waves and splashing around like a maniac. Honestly, I loved it. For a while. But the older I got, the more Dad's weekly trips became a burden to my social life. I missed birthday parties. I missed just sitting at home after a long week of school and relaxing. When I was 13, a cute girl in the 8th grade asked to work on a project with me after school. Friday was the only day she could do it. I called my father up and begged him to change our beach day to Saturday. Just once, I pleaded, just that week. But he just said no, come home, and hung up the phone. His curt response made me furious. I was not the type to disrespect my father, but at the same time, I was a teenager. Hormones pumped through my veins. The idea of a big kid like me playing with his father at the beach seemed stupid and childish. I hated him for making me go. So for the first time in my life, I ignored my father's tradition and stayed at school until well past 6. Sadie and I were in the cafeteria putting the finishing touches on a diorama when the raspy voice of our principal kicked on through the loudspeakers. Matt Richardson, if you're in the building, please report to the principal's office immediately." I cursed. Sadie giggled a bit. I picked up my books and slammed them into my backpack, promising to see her Monday, as a powder keg of rage built up inside my gut. I paced the empty halls once or twice, just to calm down, before I waltzed into the principal's office to find my father red-faced and furious, a perfect recipe for disaster. "Get in the car, now, we have to go," he fumed, and turned to the principal. "Thank you, Bill, for the announcement. We're late for soccer practice." My father grabbed me by the collar the moment we left the office. Then he nearly sprinted out the door, dragging me with him. I felt humiliated. The time on the dash read 7:05. "Soccer practice, Dad?" I repeated when he got in the driver's seat. "Really? We're lying about it now?" My father swerved the car backwards and gunned it through the empty lot. "How many times have I told you?" he shouted. 7 o'clock, every Friday. We have to be there. This is very important, Matthew. Why would you disobey me?" I wanted to scream back. I wanted to ask him why. Why? Who the hell cares if we miss one beach day? Who cares if we go at all? Was it really that important to the old man that we spend time together? But I've spent my whole life asking these questions, gaining nothing in response. "It's tradition," he would say. "Tradition is important." Sadie's pretty face and features lit up in my mind. She would probably forget me by the end of the weekend. She would probably end up dating somebody else. The rage and hormones coincided to build up inside my stomach like a powder keg. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to hit him and make him realize what he had done to me. But I reached out and slammed my fist against the car window instead. The glass shattered all over my knuckles. Warm blood ran over my fingertips. My father's angry expression turned pale. "Keep your hand inside," he snapped. "We're almost there." We arrived at the beach in the pouring rain and parked by the old prison. My father cut the engine and nearly jumped out of his seat and into the rain. He had one of those flip phones back then, the type that got shitty service too far away from the towers. He danced around dramatically trying to find a signal to place a call. "You should have effing listened to me, Matthew," he ranted. "Why didn't you listen to me?" The cell beeped unsuccessfully. My father nearly chucked it before he grabbed me by the shoulders and shook. I felt tears well up in my eyes. I know I was too old to be crying. I knew I looked like even more of a baby now, but it scared me to see my father so angry. He never cursed at me. He never shook me. My dad was the type of guy to offer a pat on the back and warm conversation as reassurance. He never acted this way. I pushed him back. I pushed him so hard he fell down to the floor and smacked him elbow on the concrete. Then I stood over him like there was more coming. I don't know what made me do it. I wanted to show him that he was not the only man in the house. I wanted to show him I could take care of myself. But my actions had the opposite effect. My father didn't respect me. He looked terrified. He looked at me like I was an animal. He looked like he didn't recognize me anymore. I started to cry again. My father still held the phone up to his ear from the ground. The fear vanished from his face as a dial tone sounded. Relief flooded in as a responded deep voice on the other end. He nodded, said okay, then hung up. Then he looked up at me and scooted away. "I'm sorry, son, but you just have to trust me," he whispered. "These trips are important." I wiped a few tears from my eyes and stuck out my hand. "Sure, Dad," I sniffled while helping him up. "I'm sorry." My father returned to the car to pull some bandages from his glove box. He carefully wrapped the ends around my knuckles. I protested for him to be careful as he stepped over to the back window and pushed away the glass shards with his jacket. Then he wrapped his arm around my shoulders and led me towards the boardwalk. "It's okay, bud. Let's go watch the waves." 3 years later, my father died 2 weeks before my 16th birthday. The injury to his elbow prompted his first physical in years. The physical found the cancer. He fought for a long time. There were ups and downs in his journey that kept him in the hospital through most of it. Nonetheless, Dad always insisted I keep up the beach trips, even if he couldn't go. "Just until your 18th birthday," he would beg pitifully. "Please?" I wanted to ask why. The question burned in my brain throughout the majority of my existence. Why did we have to go to the stupid effing beach every Friday at the exact same time? Why did it matter? But ever since that day we fought, I reconciled to never make my father that disappointed in me again. And so I went, even after he passed, and I never asked why. It quickly became a peaceful habit, rather than a painful one, filled with the memories of my late dad and the soothing sounds of the sea. But after high school, my goals drifted off in other directions. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to get away from the shore. I wanted to experience the world and see things for myself. And I wanted to live in a world where I didn't have a standing appointment every goddamn week. So when my 18th birthday rolled around, and coincidentally fell on a Friday, I resolved that night would be my final trip. I drove down to the beach a bit early and set up an umbrella underneath a passing storm. I parked my chair in the sand and watched the waves roll by, with a fresh new perspective and lease on life. Part of me welcomed the freedom. Part of me missed it. About 20 minutes later, a familiar voice shook me from my trance. I turned around to see my mother in a sundress. "Your father always intended to tell you this," she muttered as she pulled over her own beach chair. "And a little birdie told me today is your 18th birthday." I smiled and stood to give her a peck on the forehead. This made me think, did she know the reason for the tradition? Back in the 80s, she said while sitting down. Back in the 80s, your father and I liked to go out to the bars and drink. I know that probably sounds weird to you now, but we were young, and your father was a hell of a dancer. I laughed. She didn't. One night, we went to this beach bar on the edge of town, and we got into a fight. Mom allowed herself a small smile. It was one of those bad but stupid fights, you know. I don't even remember the reason. I think he said something mean about my friend. She paused and caught her breath. Anyway, we got separated. Your father marched off to the bar and got caught in line ordering drinks. I stormed off to the bathroom to drive home my point. I wanted to make him feel it, you know. But on my way out of the toilet, a man stopped me. She looked at me pensively. He had long black hair, kind of like yours. A broad jaw, kind blue eyes, denim jacket and denim jeans. Very handsome, she sighed. I talked to the man for a while, and when your dad didn't come back, I followed him outside for a cigarette. My mom looked stressed, almost as if she was on the verge of tears. I didn't stop her to ask why. Maybe I was naive. Maybe I thought nothing bad could happen. I was born in this town. I grew up in this town. I knew everyone but him. And something about that face just seemed so mysterious. He was new. Fresh blood. My mother looked away as tears started to fill her wrinkled eyes. The next sentence spilled out of her like a confession. I don't remember the He smacked my head so hard on the car door that I passed out. I woke up in the parking lot, and I'm thankful for that. The other girls were not so lucky. She stared at me, suddenly becoming stoic. 6 in total, but only 1 became pregnant. You were born 9 months later, a healthy, happy baby. I felt the color leave my face. No, I wanted to scream the word 1,000 times. No, no, no. Your father and I attended the trial. I testified. Jeremy was convicted and given a life sentence for 6 essays and 2 homicides. He served his term at the Hook Correctional Facility. She turned and slowly pointed towards the prison. My world collapsed around me. Why, Mom? Why am I here? My mother couldn't hold in her sobs any longer. Honey, he knew about you. I don't know how, she choked. He said he could hurt you. He said he could kill you, even from the inside, you know. He said he had friends. We couldn't take the chance. We couldn't. No one could know. No one. Her voice trailed off as my hand squeezed around hers. The rage and horror in my stomach turned over and over again, but I didn't say anything. All he wanted, she coughed and regained her composure. All he wanted was to see you, once a week, Fridays at 7. That was when the warden gave him time by the window. Once a week, until you're 18. My heart felt dead in my chest. I looked down at my watch to see the time. 7 o'clock on the dot. The long row of windows in the prison behind us had been dark the entire night, but as I looked closer, one room was brightened by the flick of a light. Sitting at a table was the gaunt outline of a man with long black hair, looking out towards us on the beach. 2 armed guards stood by his side. Our eyes met for a moment. Everything in my entire existence turned foreign in that one singular second. My mother sobbed and turned away. Private investigators, what incident traumatized you for the rest of your life? I've dealt with every type of horrifying case you could imagine. A mother murdering her family of 4, to a father eating out his own son. But nothing compares to the final case I took before I resigned. Most of my work was pretty boring, mainly sitting at a desk. But that all changed when I got one peculiar phone call. I picked it up, only to hear the voice of one of my closer PI friends on the other end. We chat casually for a few minutes, mostly just me trying to get my mind off of the writing pains in my wrist. But it's obvious that he's called for a reason. He explains that he's been on a missing person case, a small boy around the age of 4. His mother and father had divorced a few years ago, and his mother is currently holed up here, in my area. The boy has apparently been missing for quite a while now. The police had been contacted first, but they turned up nothing. After a week passes with no sign of a missing person, you kind of have to start assuming the worst. Nevertheless, we're usually the last resort for these cases. So my buddy goes asking around, and apparently he manages to dig up a couple of accounts, saying that the kid was seen boarding an olive green SUV with a woman looking to be in her early 30s, just hours before his disappearance was reported. Nobody thought to note the license plate. My friend continued explaining, saying his dad had left his son home alone for a half hour or so to run out for groceries, and that's when he disappeared. I was confused why he wouldn't take his son along with him. At first, I thought it might be deliberate, like he had for some reason done it on purpose. But if it was someone else that stole that poor boy, I can only imagine the grief that must be felt after realizing one of those tiny bursts of idiocy may have caused something so heart-wrenching. The father also described that same woman, short, mid-30s, long brown hair. This description matches a lot of women, a pretty average description. However, one sticks out, the boy's mother. The child's father had been granted sole custody of the kid. Apparently, the kid's mom had a little cabin out here which she would regularly visit and spend days worth of time in without alerting her husband, and whenever she was back home she'd either be asleep or out somewhere. So my buddy says he wants to team up for this one, split the pay. He's in a slightly larger town and the closest one to mine, but that's still a good 5-hour drive. Since he still has a few leads over on his end, he wants me to check out the mother, see if anything comes of that. It appears to me at this point that the case is pretty cut and dry, so I accept. He emails me the address and a picture of the kid and his mother, and I finish up my paperwork before setting off. I never could have guessed that this would be the last case I'd ever investigate. I drive around, lost for a few minutes before I finally catch sight of the gravel road that breaks through the wall of bark created by the forest's border. I glance down at my phone and sigh, placing it into my pocket. Guess it was stupid to expect this to be on Google Maps. Now, I always despise having to go into the forest. As I begin to slowly pull down the path, towering green giants blotting out the sun overhead, I'm starting to regret taking this case. The gravel slowly turns to dirt, and the small break in the tree line slowly begins to disappear at my back. It's dim in here, dense pines doing a damn good job of casting an impenetrable veil of shade over the woods. The silhouette of a small building finally begins to come into view off on the horizon, so with a small sigh, I park my car and get out. As much as I'd love to stay cooped up in that metal haven of protection, I am here on a private investigation job. I do have to remain relatively covert. That's not happening if a car just suddenly pulls up onto the front lawn of your isolated cabin. As I get a little closer, I begin to notice that something is off about the trees. I can't place exactly what it is, they just seem strange somehow. The path eventually opens up into a small clearing, a makeshift wooden gate sitting at the end of the path. It's not stopping anybody as there are no walls on either side of it. Its only purpose seems to be presenting a tattered, no trespassing sign. Past the gate is the cabin. It looks to be in surprisingly good shape, and from the outside appears rather modern, as if it's still being used. In front of it is a small patch of grass which acts as a parking space and a few areas in which it's been worn down by tires, the tracks leading right to the gate and the path I've just come down. Slowly but surely my eyes drift up from the patch of grass to the car that's been parked in it, my heart suddenly beginning to dance around in a mixture of joy and dread. Not surprisingly, it's an olive green SUV. I pull my camera up to my face and peer through the viewfinder. The SUV, the license plate. I snap a picture of each. Slowly but surely the frame drifts over to the cabin. I snap a picture, and it's at this exact moment that I realize the front door has been wide open this entire time. I go quiet on instinct, the surrounding area suddenly feeling like it's been hit with a blast of cold air. Then I hear it, a faint humming, coming from inside, soft, like a woman's voice. Once I hear it, I suddenly become unable to stop hearing it. It's a haunting, drifting tune, equal parts melodic and eerie. Every once in a while it stops or skips a little bit as if its source is running out of breath or having voice cracks. Before I really even know it, I'm taking a step forward. I know it's a stupid idea, but my legs are moving faster than my mind. Just a little peek, I tell myself. Just one peek to satiate my curiosity. That's it. The cabin looms over me as I get closer. The grass crunches under my feet until finally, just barely, the inside of the building begins to come into view. I stop dead in my tracks. Branches. It takes a moment to register, but there are tree branches covering the floor. When I say covering, I mean covering. These are not sticks. They are long, spindly, thin tree branches, deliberately cut off of their trunks. Like a natural line, my gaze follows them to the single piece of furniture in the room, a small white coffee table and a CD player perched on top, and I realized why the humming sounded like it was skipping. The trees around me suddenly feel like they're closing in on every side, like the earth below my feet is trying to swallow me whole. I don't take another moment to sit and deliberate on it. I just book it out of there as fast as I can, goddamn will myself. I launch towards my car, slam the door shut, put it into reverse and punch it out of there. That place simply felt wrong. I peel out of there as fast as I can, my heart racing and my hands shaking. All I can think about is getting as far away from that cabin as possible. As I'm speeding down the dirt road back through the woods, I catch something in my rearview mirror that makes my blood run cold. It's the woman, the one from the photo. She's standing in the middle of the road behind me, her head twisted around backwards like an owl. Even from this distance, I can see her eyes are jet black. She's smiling, her teeth unnaturally sharp. The further I went, the darker the woods became. The towering trees blotted out any remaining sunlight. I switched on my headlights, but they only illuminated a few feet ahead. I kept checking the rearview mirror, terrified I'd see that twisted, inhuman face chasing me, but there was only darkness. Just when I thought I was in the clear, a figure darted out of the trees into the road. I slammed the brakes, but it was too late. My car struck the small body with tremendous force. Heart pounding, I shakily got out, afraid of what I'd see. In the beam of the headlights lay the limp, bloodied body of a child, a boy no older than 4. My investigation concluded. The cause of death of this poor boy was now because of me.